read on average a book a week, and in today's video I will share with you how I do that and some tips and tricks on keeping your reading consistent. So hello my fellow fantasy book lovers and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi and welcome. My name is Kathy, I'm a goth girl from Belgium who loves to read fantasy books. Whenever I talk to people about how much I read, the question I get most often is, how do you do it? So in today's video, I will share with you the very simple tips and tricks that I apply for my reading and how I make it possible to read on average a book a week. Now, if we talk about reading averages, I currently read about 50 pages a day. So for me, the average book that I finish is somewhere between 300 and 400 pages, which is the average length of a book. But of course, there's also books who are 700 pages long or even more. And of course, even for me, those take longer to read, which is very, very normal. There's also books that are 100 pages or 150 pages. I finish those sometimes even in a day. It really depends how much time I take to read. Now, the first tip that I want to give you is to take your book, or in my case, my e-reader, with me everywhere I go. I have a lot of appointments that I have that people are late to, or I'm just very early, and then I tend to read. In my car, in the waiting room, even at my job during my lunch break, I read a lot. Because those are dead moments, and I can easily squeeze in a few pages or even a chapter. I'm a chapter reader. I prefer to read a chapter and then stop reading. So whenever I'm at the doctor's office, because doctors are never on time here, I know I can read at least one chapter. And for me, lunchtime at work is one of the only moments that I have peace and quiet, because I'm the only person working full day on the day that I'm doing my lunch break at work. And even when I'm home, I'm often home alone because my partner works somewhere else. So it's just me and the cats. And then whenever I have my lunch break, I tend to read at least a chapter or a few pages. And even reading a little bit during the day helps with going faster in your book. And that is the first tip. Just take your book with you everywhere that you go. If you take public transport, if you commute to go to work, this is a very easy way as well to get some pages in. The second tip that I want to give you is to include reading in your morning or evening rituals. Whenever I unwind in the evening, I don't want to be on screens anymore. So I don't want to watch too much TV. I don't want to be on my phone too much. So what do? The last hour before I go to bed, I actually try to read. So I take my book with me, either in the sofa, or whenever I go to bed a little bit earlier, I take my book with me and I read then. And for me, that hour of reading is often 50 or more pages. And whenever I start reading, I sometimes can't stop. So often that turns into 2 hours or even more. And depending how much time you want to make for that, I would recommend at least 15 minutes to half an hour. Also for your eyes, so you can get used to not having blue light on your eyes anymore. My e-reader is very good for that. After a certain hour, it turns into this evening mode, I think it's called, or dark mode. The pages turn a more yellow tint instead of this more whitish, bluish tint. And it happens, I think, at 8, 9 or 10 in the evening. And then even an hour later at 11, I have something that dims the light even more. So for me, it really helps to going to sleep and to unwinding a little bit. Now, of course, reading in the evening, if you are reading an exciting book, for me at least, it leads sometimes to not stopping to read and not wanting to sleep because you want to know how the book continues. So generally speaking, I start reading between 9 and 10. When I go to bed around 10, I will take my book with me, then read for another 15 minutes to half an hour to an hour, or sometimes even more. So that is how I actually read a lot of pages and a lot of books a week. And I feel if reading is something that is important to you, you might as well include it into some of your routines because it will make it easier to read consistently. My third tip is something that I started implying for myself recently. I doom scroll a lot. I am on my phone a lot and then I scroll through Instagram or through TikTok or even on YouTube, and it doesn't really add any value to my life scrolling like that. So I have the 5-minute or 1 chapter rule. So whenever I notice that I'm doom scrolling, I put away my phone, I take my book and I say to myself, you're either going to read 1 chapter or 5 minutes. And whenever I start reading, a lot of those times after that 1 chapter, I don't want to stop reading, or after those 5 minutes, I don't want to stop reading, and I just keep on reading. So that might also be a good reflex for you if you notice, or if you catch yourself being a lot on your phone and not really doing anything productive on it, and you would actually rather be reading, because I would rather be reading, then maybe try and implementing this as well. So whenever you notice it, just take your book, read a chapter, or put a timer for 5 minutes and read during those 5 minutes. And I'm very sure that if you spend those 5 minutes in a book instead of on TikTok, you will feel a lot better. My 4th tip is actually one of the most important ones, and it is to stop feeling guilty about not reading as much as. It is very hard to not compare to the people you see online talking about books. I often feel very guilty because I don't finish a book in a day, or whenever I take longer than a week to finish a book, I also feel guilty. And the thing is, with reading, the main element to it is it should be fun. And whether you're having fun reading 1 page a day, or whether you have fun reading once a week, that's okay. To each their own pace. There is no pressure on you. This is not your job. If it is your job and you don't enjoy reading, I don't know how you ended up doing it. But for me, reading is something that I thoroughly enjoy. And every time I get to spend time reading, it makes me a lot happier than I was before. So for me, it just makes sense that I read a lot. But I know not for everyone this is as easy. My partner, for example, he struggles reading and concentrating on a book. I personally don't have that issue. Once I start reading, I get into this bubble and I forget almost everything else that is happening around me, and I really see what I'm reading. I have a very vivid imagination, and for him it is a little bit more difficult to have that. And then finally, a tip that I want to share that doesn't apply to me, but that does apply to my partner, is listening to audiobooks. He drives a lot for his job. He's in his car a lot, so he commutes a lot. So often it is 1 hour in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. So for him, listening to audiobooks is something that really makes sense. And this is the main reason that he is able to finish books, because reading a physical book is very hard for him to actually go and sit and read. However, he's on the road a lot, so it just makes sense for him that he listens to audiobooks. He prefers that over listening to the radio and to constantly hearing traffic information anyways. And I've recently started listening to audiobooks with him on the way to festivals where we have a long drive. And it's not for me. It's not that I dislike it, but I kind of forget about the books faster when I've listened to them than whenever I've read them. Whenever I've read them, I remember the characters a lot more, I remember the storyline a lot more, whereas it's an audiobook. I tend to first of all fall asleep during the audiobooks because it's not always as captivating, whereas when you're reading your book and you fall asleep, you don't continue. If you listen to an audiobook and you fall asleep, you miss an entire bit because it just keeps playing. So it's something that you could consider that might be for you. It might also not be for you. So these are a few practical tips that you can apply to your reading if you want to be more consistent and want to read more. I personally really apply the first 2 tips. The first one, taking my book with me everywhere I go. It easily adds up 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. It makes very easily an hour a week that I just would have spent doom scrolling that I actually read. And then of course the second tip, actually including reading into my evening routine, that actually helps for me to unwind my brain and feel more at ease when I get into bed. And sometimes that means I read 1 chapter, sometimes it means I read half an hour, sometimes it's an hour, or sometimes it's even 3 hours that I read. It really depends on the day. Of course, if there's any tips that you want to share, feel free to do so in a comment down below. I'm very much looking forward to them, because sometimes I catch myself to also feel frustrated by not reading enough, and then I remember it's not a race, it's just for fun. But still, sometimes I catch myself wanting to read more than I currently do. If you enjoyed this video, of course, feel free to give it a big thumbs up. And of course, if you haven't already and you'd like to be, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I make new videos every week and I would love to have you here for every single one of them. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon with the next video. Bye!